Marvel just quietly rewrote one of the biggest endings in the entire MCU, and almost nobody is talking about it the right way. At the end of Loki Season 2, Tom Hiddleston's character sat down on a throne made of branches, wearing green robes and a crown built from timelines, and he became a god. Not a metaphor, an actual, literal god of the multiverse, holding every reality together with his own body so the rest of us could keep existing. It was framed as forever. It was framed as a cage he chose willingly. Then the new Avengers, Doomsday trailer dropped, and in one 4-second shot, that entire arrangement looks like it's already over. No throne, no crown, no robes, just a guy in a rumpled TVA suit, standing inside somebody's living room, holding what looks like a business card. So today we're breaking down exactly what that shot means, what it doesn't mean, what the marketing team might be hiding, what the comics already did with this exact idea a decade ago, and why this could end up being the smartest sequel setup Marvel has written in years. Stick around, because the last section connects this directly to Secret Wars, and that part changes how you should watch the rest of this trailer. Let's slow down and describe the shot itself, because the internet has already sprinted past it. In the trailer, Loki is standing inside a house. The lighting is warm, almost domestic. He's wearing the same kind of TVA issue outfit he wore earlier in Season 2, before his transformation, not the green robes from the finale. In his hand is a small card. On the front, most outlets agree it looks like TVA identification. On the back, there appears to be a printed image of a tree, branches spreading outward, which matches the multiversal tree Loki personally created at the end of Season 2. That single detail is doing a lot of work. It tells us this isn't an earlier, deleted timeline of Loki before his transformation. This is Loki after everything that happened in the finale, carrying proof of what he became, but no longer sitting still with it. And the location matters just as much as the outfit. Multiple outlets tracking the trailer frame by frame have pointed out that the curtains and window behind Loki match the house shown in Avengers. Doomsday's very first teaser, the one that revealed Chris Evans was returning as Steve Rogers, older, bearded, holding a newborn baby, living out a quiet life with Peggy Carter after the ending of Endgame. Put those two pieces together, and you get a scene that isn't really about Loki at all. It's about who Loki is visiting, and why the god of an entire multiverse would leave his post to knock on that particular door. Here's where a lot of early reactions got it backwards. The assumption going in was that Loki, having become the anchor of the multiverse, would need to stay physically fixed in one place, like a load-bearing wall you can't remove without the ceiling coming down. Under that logic, showing him up and walking around looks like a retreat from his own ending. But think about what the job actually is. Loki isn't a decoration sitting on a throne for aesthetic purposes. He's the person managing an infinite, branching structure of timelines that used to be pruned by a bureaucracy and are now allowed to grow freely. That's not a passive job. That's closer to running the most complicated infrastructure in existence, except the infrastructure is reality itself. Tom Hiddleston himself has already commented on this, and it's worth putting his actual words in front of you instead of guessing. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he described the ending of the Disney Plus series as a closure point, not an open wound, and said that when Marvel approached him about Doomsday, the plan was to start the character from that finishing line rather than undo any of it. His quote, paraphrased, was essentially that there was no unstitching of what Loki became. That development still stands. The movie begins after it, not around it. So this isn't Loki losing his throne. It's Loki using the authority the throne gave him to actually do something with it. A god who never leaves the temple isn't protecting anything. He's just furniture. Now let's talk about why Steve Rogers' house specifically matters, because this is where the theory gets genuinely interesting. At the end of Avengers Endgame, Steve Rogers went back in time and lived out a life with Peggy Carter, then returned as an old man to pass the shield to Sam Wilson. For years, fans have pointed out the obvious wrinkle in that scene. If Steve lived an entire life in the past, he should have created an entirely new branch timeline the moment he changed history based on everything the show Loki taught us about how branching works. That means Steve Rogers, sitting quietly with his family in that house, might be exactly the kind of anomaly the old TVA used to erase without a second thought. Except the old TVA doesn't exist anymore in that form. Loki does, and he built the system that replaced it. Several outlets tracking trailer details have floated a version of this theory, that Loki isn't showing up to punish Steve or unravel his timeline, but to protect it, possibly even to hand him that exact card so Steve has a way to reach him if that branch of reality ever comes under threat. If that's the case, this quiet living room scene might be Loki quietly using his new power to shield the people he cares about, the same instinct that got him onto that throne in the first place, just aimed outward this time instead of inward. That would also explain why Steve Rogers is confirmed to reunite with Thor later in this same trailer. If Loki cleared the way for that timeline to survive, Steve being alive and walking around in the present isn't an accident. It's a direct consequence of decisions Loki already made off-screen. If you want to know where Marvel might be steering this whole multiversal crisis, you don't need to speculate blind. The comics already ran this exact scenario, and it ended about as badly as it possibly could. Back in 2015, a storyline called Time Runs Out set up the original Secret Wars event. In that story, entire universes started slamming into each other in something called an incursion, two realities occupying the same space until one or both got wiped out completely. A group of the smartest minds on Earth, calling themselves the Illuminati, made the call to start destroying other universes preemptively, just to keep their own alive a little longer. It bought time. It also cost trillions of lives, and it never really worked as a long-term fix. By the end of that storyline, there were only two universes left in the entire fictional multiverse, and even those two were on a collision course that neither side could stop. Line that up against what we're seeing built toward Avengers, Doomsday. The trailer shows the Avengers and the Fantastic Four on one side, and the X-Men on the other, which strongly implies these are separate realities that are now being forced together. If the movie is drawing from that same well, we may be watching the early stages of an incursion story, where the number of surviving timelines keeps shrinking and every faction is fighting less over ideology and more over which universe gets to survive the collision. And if that's genuinely what's happening, it reframes Loki's entire situation. He spent an entire season protecting an effectively infinite number of branching timelines. If Dr. Doom's plan involves collapsing that number down to just a handful of realities standing, then Loki suddenly has far less left to physically anchor. The job changes from holding up an endless tree to defending the last few branches still standing. That would explain exactly why he's not sitting on a throne anymore. There may not be enough multiverse left to require one that lets address the theory almost everyone had before this trailer even existed, because it's worth explaining why it might be wrong. Going into Doomsday, plenty of people assumed Victor Von Doom would go straight after Loki, either to eliminate the one person capable of stabilizing the multiverse, or to try to seize that power for himself. It's a clean, obvious villain move, and honestly it still might happen somewhere in this film. But this trailer suggests a more interesting possibility. If entire universes are already colliding and disappearing, Doom might not need to fight Loki directly at all. He might just need the chaos itself to force Loki's hand, to make him choose which realities get saved and which ones don't. That's a much crueler kind of conflict than a straightforward fight. It turns Loki's own compassion, the exact trait that redeemed him in the first place, into the mechanism of his suffering. Robert Downey Jr.'s version of Doom, at least based on how the character has always operated in the comics, tends to prefer manipulation over brute force, and using Loki's sense of responsibility against him fits that pattern far better than a simple physical confrontation would. Here's the part worth sitting with before we wrap up, because it's easy to treat every trailer detail as just a puzzle piece and forget to ask if the story decision is actually a good one. The lazy version of this sequel would have been simple. Undo Loki's ending, put him back in danger, force him through another redemption arc so the movie has stakes for him personally. We've seen that pattern across the multiverse saga more than once, characters getting reset just so the plot has somewhere to send them. Instead, based on everything from this trailer and from Hiddleston's own comments, Doomsday appears to be doing something rarer. It's taking a character's ending seriously, treating his growth as permanent, and then asking a harder question. What does a genuinely changed person do with power once they finally have it? Not will Loki turn back into a villain, but how does someone who spent his whole life being selfish learn to use unlimited authority selflessly when the entire multiverse is now depending on him getting that choice right? That's a more mature story than most blockbuster sequels attempt. And if the Steve Rogers theory holds up, the first thing we see this newly godlike Loki doing with his power isn't controlling anyone. It's quietly making sure one family gets to keep the ordinary life they built for themselves. For a character who spent his entire arc craving control over others, that's about as clean a full circle as you could write. So to recap where things stand right now. Loki is confirmed to be walking freely across realities in Avengers. Doomsday, not sitting fixed on his throne. The TVA card links directly back to the tree he built at the end of Season 2, confirming this is the same transformed version of the character. The location appears to be Steve Rogers' house, setting up a possible protective, not adversarial, meeting between the two of them. And the wider structure of the film may be borrowing directly from the Secret Wars comics, where colliding universes forced impossible choices onto the very few people capable of making them. Avengers. Doomsday releases in theaters on December 18, 2026, and based on everything packed into just a few seconds of trailer footage, Loki's 4 seasons of character development might end up being the emotional backbone the entire film is quietly built around. If you want the full breakdown of everything else hiding in this trailer, including the Doctor Doom reveal and the X-Men face-off, that video is linked right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.